Maybe we're bibliotherapists already.
Oh my God, we've been doing it for free this whole time. You guys, this is nonsense. We should be charging for this.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
the podcast where we should all over our books.
Happy podcast day.
Hey,
Happy
best day of the
podcast
week.
day.
How's everyone doing this weekend?
I'm a little bit sick, but I don't know what it is. It just feels like a mild cold.
Aw.
But of course, you know,
yeah,
the world we live in, a mild cold is like Armageddon. So.
Right. That's the thing. Anytime anyone feels sick, it's like, oh my God, is it COVID? And it's just it makes it even more anxiety inducing.
Right.
Yeah.
I did get my flu shot yesterday, so I feel good about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're sending us vouchers now because obviously we're not getting our flu shot in the office.
Right.
And they said they sent it, so I need to find the voucher so I can get my flu shot.
Right. Yeah. Get your flu shot, everyone. It's really important.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that we've finished our flu shot PSA, Rachel, what are you reading this week?
So just this morning, I finished a book. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's a spoiler for next week. But currently, I'm listening to the audiobook of Rage by Bob Woodward, which we talked about on last week's episode. I'm about halfway into it. It's interesting. I mean, obviously, Bob Woodward's a great writer, so it's a very engaging book, and the narrative flows really well. And the person they got to narrate the audiobook is really good. And I wasn't sure what to expect. The only thing I had heard really about it was the stuff about the coronavirus and how Trump had already known. We haven't really gotten into that very much. He sort of opens with that and then goes back to the beginning. And we get a lot of stuff from Rex Tillerson's Secretary of State stuff, and then we get a lot of Jim Mattis stuff, and right now he's talking about the stuff with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, so it's really interesting. Definitely a lot of stuff that I forgot happened because 2020 erased all my memory.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, what? So yeah, it's I don't want to say I'm enjoying it, quote unquote, but it's engaging. It's a good book.
Good.
I feel like I've avoided a lot of those books about the Trump presidency just because it feels like enough to hear about it in real time. But what you just said makes me feel like, yes, there's been so much that has happened and we do forget about it. It's not that we forget how awful it is, but just like the details, it's easy to forget because there's just something new every week. I mean, he's a reality show. He's still doing a reality show. And so every week he's just controlling the news cycle with reality TV every week. So I do want to read that, even though I know it'll just make me angry.
Yeah.
Hence the title.
Yeah.
Kelly, what are you reading?
Well, actually, now that Rachel mentioned that, what I am reading is also a spoiler for next week's episode. But I am making a rare foray into nonfiction, and I'm not very far in. It's really good so far, and I'm gonna just say it's by Claudia Rankine, and I talked about her book Citizen earlier, possibly the last time we did the Black author episodes. But her work is so powerful, and I'm so glad this one's out. Just Us. I'm like, I've already said the author, so I'm like, I might as well just say Just Us. Oh. And it's really good so far. I'm excited to keep going. And I am not reading any of the Trump presidency books, but my mom, who, as I've started to tell her, is our political correspondent, and she has read she's reading Melania and Me right now. She read she has Michael Cohen's book, but she hasn't read that yet. She read Mary Trump's book and really enjoyed it and was telling me stuff about it. I don't think she's getting Bob Woodward's yet, but she will. So if you need like Donald Trump is not great book recommendations, my mother's got you covered.
Just ask Sue Hager.
Yeah. So
I do want to read Bob Woodward's book on Obama's presidency, Obama's Wars. Friend of mine, friend of the pod, Dr. Jeff Willis, said that was really good. So I'll try to read that soon too.
Yeah. And I know he wrote another book, which I think was Fear, about Donald Trump. So
yeah,
I guess the rare 2-book deal from Bob Woodward. And I mean, I would rather be punched in the face than talk to Bob Woodward, because I feel like he would just expose everything awful about me. But I'm smart enough to know it, and I'm not important enough for him to talk to. So I'm very excited to never have that happen.
There is kind of a funny quote from Trump in Rage about Fear, the other book. It's kind of fun. It's like, it's not really a spoiler, so I'll just tell you, but he's talking to Bob, and Bob's asking him about, I can't remember if he's asking him about the meeting with Putin or about the meeting with Kim Jong-un, but he's asking him about that, and he's like, so what? So what? I met with him. I wasn't just sitting at home reading your book. I met with him, or something like that. And it did make me laugh. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh God, I just.
Yeah.
oh gosh, yep. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say what I was reading this week, which is nothing different from what I was reading last week. It's been a very busy week at work, and I just haven't had a lot of time to make progress, but I'm also just kind of going back and forth between different things, so that's my own fault. But I am really enjoying Transcendent Kingdom by Jassy. I was telling Kelly and Rachel earlier, I feel like every chapter of that book I stop and I have to close the book and just think about it and just sort of take it in. There's one chapter that I just finished, which is about a flashback that she has of just her and her brother. Well, it's kind of a spoiler, but not really. But when they were kids, he was eating so much because he was a growing boy, and his mom started hiding food because she was like, these kids are going to eat us out of home and house. And so she started hiding like like a box of Cheerios, because otherwise he would just eat it like in one sitting.
Yeah.
And so they go on a hunt to like find the food, and he's like, okay, let's split up. You take upstairs, I'll take downstairs, and then we'll meet up. And it's just so funny and cute, like a cute story of kids. And it reminded me of my little brother and sister when I was babysitting them once. They snuck ice cream after I told them they were not allowed to have it, and it was just such a cute, like they were caught red-handed in the act, and like it's such a cute memory, and it reminded me of that. But it's just, I don't know why that scene particularly, I had to stop and like close the book and think about it after, because there's a lot more about her brother, the main character's brother in the book, and the way she writes these flashbacks is just really beautiful. And I don't know, I'm enjoying it, but I'm savoring it.
Yeah.
And I'm also listening to the audiobook of Pillars of the Earth, which is a reread for me, but I wanted to reread it so I can listen to the prequel and just have Pillars fresh in my mind, because the prequel, the title of which I cannot remember
it's okay.
right now, by Ken Follett, I do plan to listen to that on audiobook as well. And it says that the Pillars picks up right where the prequel ends.
Oh.
So yeah, so I'm guessing we're going to get the history of these families going back a few generations. And so I want to have everything fresh in my mind for that.
Yeah.
That's great, because I was planning to pick up Pillars today, now that I finished that other book. So that was my plan. So we'll both be reading it.
Perfect.
And I think I said last week that I had hoped that my current reading would be Transcendent Kingdom. And that did not happen. But we have it now for book club on Saturday, like Saturday evening. So
yep,
we'll
gotta
see,
get to it.
I guess. Yeah. But I am determined. I'm excited for it. I loved Homegoing, so it'll happen.
Yeah, you'll read it.
Because I don't want Philip to yell at me for not reading it. We all remember what happened with Hollow Kingdom.
We do. Kelly and I did not read that book, and Philip did, and he was mad because he didn't like it.
and he read the whole book.
Right.
And he hated it. But, you know, it was for book club, so he rallied. And you started reading it, but didn't really like it. So you
couldn't get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I literally opened it on my Kindle and was just like, no. And just didn't even try.
He brings it up every time now. Just like, I want to make sure you're going to read the book. Like, it happened one time, Philip.
Oh, poor
yeah.
8 years of being in a book club. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy birthday, Philip. Sorry we ruined book club that one time. In 8 years, one time.
Yeah. All right, let's
listen to this podcast.
No, I don't think so.
I'm gonna text him and tell him off.
But actually, fun fact, it was not just one time. It happened one other time with The Casual Vacancy by one J.K. Rowling, which brings us nicely into this week's book news. And we have a lot of it. Obviously, we're all upset about J.K. Rowling and her latest bit of bullshit, but I don't want to talk about that right now. What I'm excited about is Barack Obama's memoir, Volume 1, finally announced. It is A Promised Land. It will be out November 17th, right after the election, so no matter what, something good is coming. It is the first volume of his memoirs, his presidential memoirs, which is great because it's 768 pages. Our political correspondent, my mother, will likely not be reading it because she was very excited until she learned it was 768 pages, and then she can't be doing that. So we will be needing another political correspondent. Please email us at our Gmail. Rachel will tell you how at the end of the episode. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say I already pre-ordered that from Bull Moose Music, which is my local indie bookstore. So I'm really excited for that book.
I also just pre-ordered it from my local indie bookstore, and I cannot wait. I'm gonna read it in hardcover, and I'm gonna get the audiobook, and I might kind of go back and forth because I listened to his other 2 books on audio, Dreams from My Father and The Audacity of Hope, and they were great. And he won a Grammy for narrating it himself, as did Michelle Obama for Becoming.
Yeah.
And I read that this book deal, they sold their books as a package deal to Crown for $65 million.
Whoa.
And I was reading today that his first book, Dreams from My Father, he received a $40,000 advance. And Peter Osnos was the publisher at Times Books when he acquired it, and Osnos was quoted as saying that's got to be the biggest jump in history of advances from 40,000 to 65 million. But I don't think they overpaid for them. I think Michelle Obama's Becoming has already sold over 8 million units.
Yeah.
And this will, I'm sure, sell even more. So I love it. I love the title. I'm excited to see who's writing the forward. I just can't wait.
One other fun fact, and I don't know what the blurb actually says because I happened to see it and then it disappeared, but Michelle Obama is blurbing it. And I'm like, that's fantastic.
Do you think she writes the foreword? I don't know if we know who wrote the foreword.
I don't think we know yet.
Okay.
I don't even think we have the real cover. I think it's just so I don't think we know. I would not be surprised if she wrote the foreword, and also I'd be willing to bet if it was a package deal, I bet a lot of that was based on what would be her book too, because I don't usually read presidential memoirs, but I plan to read his. But Michelle Obama, I was like, I'm going to buy this book the second I can. I'm going to read it the second I can. And I loved it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, I couldn't find it on Goodreads, but I didn't search by ISBN number, so it might be on there and I just haven't been able to find it yet. But I was able to pre-order it, so I was like, good, it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm planning to get it for my Kindle because it's so thick, but I also so I guess Big Books episode volume 2 will come out maybe around that time and we'll all talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get him on the podcast. I don't think he's that busy now. I'll start working on it.
Okay.
But I'm also going to order a physical copy. And in honor of friend of the pod, Becky, I'm going to get it from Mahogany Books because that's her favorite indie.
That's a great idea.
Sorry, local indies in Baltimore. Y'all are fine. But I'm so excited for this book because I feel like we've been waiting a long time for it.
Yeah. And it was a surprise. No one knew it was coming out this year until just recently. And I love publishing secrets. I love when books you have to keep it under wraps. And I work in publishing, and I've always dreamed of being on a team that had like a really special book that you couldn't talk about until, like an embargo. But
right.
What my publisher published the 9/11 Commission report, and that was a secret until it was published. But I wasn't working there when it happened, so I missed the excitement. I'm still mad about it.
I feel like I suck at keeping secrets. So I don't tell everybody, but I don't know that there's a secret I have that I have not told at least 2 people. So, I don't know. Don't trust me, I guess, is the point here. But, anyway, we have a bunch of book news still. Anne Cleves, who is a mystery author, in honor of her character, Vera Kelly's, I think, honestly, I'm not sure what number it is, but it's like an anniversary of her character being created. She's decided that she's going to fund 2 bibliotherapists. Because she believes, as I do, as I'm pretty sure we all do, that books can actually save lives and they can help you heal. And so she's going to fund 2 bibliotherapists for like the area where she lives. And I love that idea. I love it so much. And I know you guys have been reading better.
I've never heard of a bibliotherapist until you told me about this story. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's like a reading coach, someone who recommends books that will help you deal with whatever you might need like coaching with or help with, and it's like, it's interesting because not every book is going to work in the same way for every person, right? Someone might find something really funny and uplifting, and another person might find that same book kind of trite or saccharine. So I thought it was interesting. I didn't know that was a career, and now I might be going back to school to be a bibliotherapist. I don't know. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in that article it said that she had received help from a bibliotherapist, right?
Right.
To get her through a hard time. So I thought that was interesting.
And I feel like, and I know we've talked about this before, but the way that I think a lot of times we cope with things like living through a pandemic is to, kind of escape into the world of books, which unfortunately I've really not been doing because that would cut into my doom scrolling at time, and we can't have that. But I know you guys have been reading better, and it's good, like just knowing that it does sound like the best career.
Yeah, I do find that when I put down my phone and stop doom scrolling and I pick up a book, a print book especially, and just if I'm able to relax and get into it, I do feel better after. And I don't feel that way after watching a couple hours of TV or, playing games on my phone. After that, I feel a little drained. So I think that it is a nice escape and one that doesn't leave me feeling negative or anything like that. There are times where I feel like I've read so much during a day and I feel guilty for not doing anything else. That's the one time where I feel like bad about reading, but it's not even like I feel like bad. I'm just like, I should, for some reason, I think I should be doing other things like chores.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think as a culture, we're not good at relaxing and doing things just for us. So it's like, oh, well, I listened to a podcast today, but I did it while cleaning, so I'm okay. Or I listened to an audiobook, but I did it while cooking, so that's okay. And we don't need to earn joy, I guess is what I want to say. Like, we don't deserve to be happy only if we're doing other stuff like what we should be doing.
I'm gonna write that down.
We deserve it because we're people.
Thank you for saying that, Kelly.
We don't need to earn joy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Maybe we're bibliotherapists already.
Oh my God, we've been doing it for free this whole time. You guys, this is nonsense. We should be charging for this. God.
Speaking of joy,
my new book, how to get what you want without doing a thing you should, the Kelly Hager way.
Yes.
I haven't made my bed in 10 years.
But speaking of joy, Rachel, do you want to introduce this week's What You Should Read segment?
Yes. So this week's What You Should Read segment is everything by Kay Ancrum.
Yes.
You should read all of the stuff she writes, including her Twitter.
Yes, you should.
But especially her books, which are amazing and which we're going to, in the next segment, talk to her all about because she is this week's guest. So we're very excited for that.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. I'm so thrilled that she agreed to come on the podcast. As soon as I read her book, The Weight of the Stars, I was just so in love with her as a writer. And then I had to read everything she'd written, which was also a book called The Wicker King, and she has more books coming out. So it's just, she's such a unique writer. And I just can't wait to talk to her about, her books and her writing process and the way she thinks about writing. I'm enthralled already. So I can't wait.
Yeah. Yes.
And yes, her Twitter is delightful. So follow her. I think it's at Kayla Ancrum on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
She's so funny on Twitter. So good. So yeah. Great. So we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will have Kay Ancrum on the podcast. Yay! Welcome back. Today we are joined by author Kay Ancrum. Kay grew up in Chicago, Illinois. She attended Dominican University to study fashion merchandising, but was lured into getting an English degree after spending too many nights experimenting with hard literary criticism and hanging out with unsavory types like poetry students. She is the author of The Wicker King and The Weight of the Stars, as well as the forthcoming 2021 release, Darling. She also happens to be one of our favorite authors of all time. Welcome to the podcast, Kay Ancrum.
Hi, thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
We've been just so excited all week. And we are so excited to talk to you about your books and your writing, but also we all follow you on Twitter and just really enjoy your Twitter. And I don't know if you know this, but on our podcast, we talk about what you should read, but we also have a segment that pops up every now and again called What You Should Eat, because we love cooking and recipes. And I noticed you've tweeted about cooking before as well, and you have an interest in that. So I was curious if you have like a go-to recipe that you love to make that you could share with us.
Absolutely. I actually cook from scratch every day as like a stress relief. And I keep all of my recipes in my bookmarks on my phone. And I actually have an amazing bread recipe that I would like to share with you guys. It's skillet bread. And it was my very first time making bread. So I was very prepared for it to be nasty. But it wasn't. That means this is easy. So let me see.
I have a skillet, so I'm ready. I can do this.
All right. So I'm not very strong because I never work out. So I'm not that great at kneading. And so this one also requires no kneading, which is really good. Easy, no knead skillet bread. And it is, I think it has like 4 ingredients or something.
Nice.
All right. It takes 2 hours to make. So 4 cups of flour, 1 package of rapid rise yeast, if you can find it in this hellscape. We've got sea salt, 2 cups of warm water, and olive oil. And basically all you do is mix all the ingredients together in, a bowl in no particular order. And then just kind of have it sit on the counter for an hour, and then, mix it again a little bit, and then take olive oil, put it in your skillet, cover the little loaf in olive oil, and put it to rest for another hour. And then you just pop it in the oven. And then I think it's in there for an hour and 45 minutes. And I think it's like 400 degrees or something like that. But I will definitely send you guys over the link so you can just link everybody to it.
That sounds great. Oh, I love bread, and I love anything made in a skillet. So I'll definitely try that. Before we were recording, Kelly mentioned you all were talking about Chipotle on Twitter as well.
Yeah, I was trying to tell the story of you using Chipotle as vengeance. But apparently one of my most favorite things to do is take a great story, tell it badly, and ruin it for everybody. So I was like, maybe you could tell the story because it's better. I would ruin it.
The thing where you like stack different ingredients and oh my god. So I think maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, somebody put something up on this site that's kind of like Medium but not, about how he went to Chipotle and ordered a regular burrito and got it, and it was the most horrifically assembled burrito that he had ever experienced in his life. And he wrote this really like angry passive-aggressive letter directed to the person who made the burrito. I think it starts with something like, "Hi, nice to meet you. Have you ever been to Earth?" Like proceeds to like talk to him about how he made the burrito. And basically the gist of the story is that he made the burrito vertically. So instead of putting all the ingredients horizontally, so when you bite into it, you get like, all the different, guacamole and rice and everything like that. Like the top was just guacamole. And then when you were done eating that, sour cream for some, then lettuce, then rice and beans, and then meat all the way at the bottom. And he was just so angry, and it was super hilarious because like the best anger is the anger about stuff that doesn't matter. That level of intensity, super funny.
Yeah, that would ruin my whole day if my burrito was assembled like that.
Yeah, it was super nice to like everybody who gives me food in restaurants, because like I worked a restaurant job for 1 day and failed horribly, and was just like, okay, you know what? All of you guys deserve to be paid at like 40% tip.
Yeah.
But
yes.
I think if someone gave me a burrito like that, I would come back and I'd be like, can you make me another one?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, for a switch to topic to books and writing, so we've all read both of your books and we love them so much, but for those who haven't read your books, how would you describe the kind of books that you write? And I guess what draws you to writing and telling these stories?
So I do like young adult fiction. I prefer to write about like LGBTQ communities, and also like to have a lot of like racial and like diversity in my works, because I'm very focused on representational fiction. And I think that, that kind of diversity does actually represent the world that I live in and the community that I'm from. Chicago is very, very diverse. So there's that first. And then the second thing that I've heard people say about my books is that they're kind of like watching the show Skins. I don't know if a lot of you kind of know about like teen,
Yes.
but it's very like teenagers doing things they shouldn't be doing, running around in the dark in the night, having an exceptionally terrible time, while the only thing that kind of brings them any, joy and comfort is the mutual love and support of each other. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my niche. My first book, The Wicker King, is a story about hallucinations. And it's about a really rare physical brain injury that can make it so that you hallucinate things incredibly vividly. And it is one of 3 hallucinatory disorders that you can get that has no psychosis attached. And it's a story about these 2 friends, and one of them happens to develop this disorder, and he sees this like really elaborate world that he has to like accomplish a task in, but the book is from the perspective of his best friend who can't see it at all, who has to help him save this world that he can't. And then my second book is a lesbian space-themed romance. It is about these 2 girls who come from really different economic backgrounds, who bond with each other over a mutual love of space travel.
Oh my gosh. When I heard the description of that book, I was like, I need it now. And one of the themes I found consistent in both books was the found families aspect. Both books have very strong friendship groups and these teens who are struggling with a variety of different aspects of life, and they find comfort in each other and in their relationships with each other. And I loved both books, and I loved especially the author's note that you put in at the end where you speak directly to the reader. And I know I'm not the target audience, but even I reading those notes just felt so comforted almost reading those notes, because you really talk about what you want them to take away from it. And I was just curious what made you decide to put those notes in, and how important it is to you that the books reach the audience that you're hoping that they will reach.
Actually, I have a really strong opinion about this. So when I first started writing my first book, like I was a young adult, so I wasn't, somebody who is an adult trying to reach to children and stuff. Like I was the children, and I was writing about things that are going on, within my age group and stuff like that. And I think I was 20 when I wrote The Wicker King.
Oh, wow.
And I'm 29 now, so this was a long time ago. And while I was writing it, when I, finished, I was like, this is really great. I'm going to start subbing it in places and stuff like that. My agent, one of the things that she talked to me about really, really briefly, but definitely like made a huge impression, was that this book, when it comes out, will probably be a little bit, further into the future, and that I'll be writing it specifically kind of to children and teens. And it dawned on me that, one, it's an incredible privilege to be in a position to have your work distributed so vastly. But 2, being a children's author is also being like a steward of kind of ethics and community. So taking, the messages that you have in your books very seriously is incredibly important. And even though it seems like a kind of career where, you're writing something because you love it and or you're having so much fun and everything like that, you really are making an impact on teenagers in the same way that you were impacted upon as a teenager. So when I was 26 and the book was finally about to come out, my editor was like, oh, do you want to do an author's note and just be like, oh, thanks for reading my book or something? And I was like, you know what? I want to write to the children who picked up this book because they needed it. And I want to talk to them about some things that are important to start an understanding of if they're in a situation where they don't have an adult to say those things to them. And that, was really important for me to do. And then in regards to The Way to the Stars, the portrayal of teenagers in a lot of books in general, and actually in The Wicker King as well, is one where you kind of you fuck up, mm-hmm. you mess things up. You can't necessarily do what it is that you want to do. There are problems. Sometimes they can be solved by the narrative. But I think in my experience, a lot of teenagers are really capable of actually succeeding at whatever it is that they're doing. And I haven't found very many contemporary portrayals of that strength and resilience that, adults that we know have made mistakes, if we can do better than them, that I come from this environment, and, you know, this is what I've learned, this is how I can build a home, and this is what I cherish and stuff like that. I think that that's very important to have, because there are teenagers who are raising entire families, working after school when they're, you know, 16, 17 years old, paying their parents' bills. When I was in middle school, I had a friend whose parents didn't speak English, and she used to do their taxes, and we were 13. So like, I really wanted to put that representation in my books. And then again, in regards to representation, you did mention the found family thing. It's very important to me that young LGBT kids kind of understand their history, because we are a community that has lost a generation. So there is a generation gap in regards to our knowledge. So one of the things that's really, really integral to the entire LGBT community across all of those borders is found family, because a lot of the times, like, we are put by our families, or rejected by our families, or cannot properly be protected by our families, or if we are the lucky ones, they have the family that everybody goes to because their own families aren't providing. So if you got the lucky parents, you know, share them. And I really feel like that isolation is something that a lot of LGBT kids grow up with, even within their found family communities. So having a book that kind of like represents that and shows that as positive, and shows teenagers making families with each other, you know, both because they love each other, but also out of necessity, is a good representation of, you know, the community that I love.
I love that. That's amazing. And I love the idea of the stewardship of different lessons, or different just things like that. It's so great. Is there a character in your books that you, I don't know, relate to the most, or feel like, I don't want to say favorite character, but yeah, do you have a favorite character?
A little bit. I have one for each of my books. I really like the character Rena in Wicker King. I think that she's very unique in comparison to the other characters. She's kind of like a little bit more mature and a little bit more, you know, wary about the circumstances, and is one of the only characters who does something that makes the main characters think, okay, we might actually need some help, you know, which is kind of nice. And I like when readers like her, because I feel like when they talk about the reasons that they like her, they're talking about reasons why they would like adults and like people in their lives who like actually care enough to give people the freedom to explore making bad decisions, but also be there for them when those bad decisions explode in their face, which is nice. And then for The Way to the Stars, my favorite character, you'll be surprised, is Shannon Greenlee. She's the popular girl who decides to hang out with the like weirdo kids, because she's like, you guys seem fun, and just kind of walks over to them. He's just like, yeah, we can be best friends. This is cool. And the reason I like her is because I think there needs to be way more portrayals of like popular girl characters that are like these and not like antagonistic. Because I had the unique joy of going to a high school where the popular girl was popular for a reason, and that reason was because she was very nice. And like, she was the kind of person who, she would talk to everybody, and you talked to her like a year ago, and you'd mention like, oh, you know, my mom is going to Puerto Rico or something, and then a full year later you'd run into her in the lunchroom. She'd be like, oh my god, I haven't spoken to you for a really long time, how was your mom's trip? And you're like, what the hell? Why do you remember this? Also, I feel very cared for all of a sudden. Like, that was why she was popular, and I was just so enchanted by the idea of that. So I love putting in those characters who are like, you know, yes, I have the option to be like a huge, you know, antagonistic disaster for our plucky main characters, but instead I'm going to be fun and nice and invite them to parties and support their goals and stuff. So.
Yeah, and it subverts the mean girl trope, right? Which we see, I think, probably too often, and it's nice to see girls portrayed as kind, even if they are the popular ones. They're not wielding their popularity as a weapon or to hold on to that power. And I remember that scene in your book where she's walking towards the group and they're all just like, what? But she's like, no, I want to hang out with you. You seem cool.
Yeah, and I think that it's like, it supports kind of like a multifaceted portrayal of like women and girls.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we're pretty much, for the majority of the 90s just split between the like, you know, kind of downtrodden nerd girl who can't connect with people and the like popular mean girl who's very, you know, intense and whatever. And like slowly we started like closing that gap.
Yeah.
And we haven't like completely hit that, you know, line of demarcation, but we're really, really close. And I like Shannon Greenlee because she's cool, like Juno from Juno, but she's like kind of like a Regina George, but like with Juno's personality, which is fun and more realistic, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So what can you tell us about your new book, Darling, coming out, I think in March, I read, maybe?
I believe so. Or, well, I mean, coronavirus and all that stuff, so a lot of things are getting pushed back,
Yeah.
but I was told late spring, right before the summer, so we can hit all the good conferences and stuff. So, all right, Darling is a lot of fun. I'm definitely the kind of author that like does a lot of planning. So I came up with the plot for Darling in 2014, I believe. So this one is a bit of an older idea of mine. And what I wanted to do for this book was I wanted to take the original Peter Pan book, set up with the chapters and the story progression, lift everything perfectly from it, and drop it in the modern era. So I took like all the characters. I took like, you know, Captain Hook and made him like Detective Inspector Hook. And then
Ooh.
the mermaids are like drag queens, and like, you know, just all of the different characters are replaced to realistic portrayals of them as people. And then one thing that I have really strong feelings about in regards to Peter Pan is the really cool, and I've never seen any other author do this. Actually, I have. No, I'm kidding. Coraline from Neil Gaiman. So when you design a book to be read by two different groups of people and to get two completely different meanings and pretty consistently be the same ones in each one, Peter Pan was written to be like an adventure story about like freedom and triumph over wickedness for children. But for parents, it's specifically designed to showcase Peter Pan as kind of like a monster of a character. And when you're younger and you're reading it, your focus is majority on, you know, the adventure. They're going to this place and they're seeing all these, you know, stuff, and Wendy's doing these things, and Peter Pan, and there's violence, and then at the end they all go home and whatever. But when you're reading it as an adult, like the character of Peter has absolutely no empathy whatsoever, and he actually kills several people. And him and what he does in regards to like hurting people for his own entertainment is blatant and consistently repeated. And then he also has memory issues that are explored in a really subtle way, but is absolutely devastating when you're reading it with the understanding of what's occurring. And this isn't a spoiler because this book's been out for like a bajillion years, but at the end of it, there's this part where Peter comes back to visit Wendy, and she's like an adult, and he doesn't remember her at all. And she's like, oh, it's Peter. And he's like, you know, I don't want to talk to you. You're an adult. I want to talk to your daughter. She's my new Wendy. She's my new mother. And that understanding that like she was never really particularly special to him, that she's just kind of like a, you know, figurehead upon which he projects his, you know, yawning chasm of hollowness inside of his horrifying little body is just like so terrifying to read at the end of the book as an adult when you have the ability to understand that. So I wanted to write Darling as a book version, or as a version of Peter Pan where that's actually acknowledged and explored. So Darling is a Peter Pan book about Peter Pan being a serial killer.
Wow.
Serial killer?
Oh.
Wow.
And it's about all of the girls, Tinkerbell, and Wendy, and Tiger Lily. I replaced and actually did a actual like indigenous girl, and it's about them working together to like bring him to justice.
Bring him to justice. Wow.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Oh, yeah. I can't wait.
I'm so excited to see what people think.
I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, we'll have to do an episode about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely love to do that.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, I'm really excited to read that, and I loved all of your books. I was reading an interview that you gave not too long ago, I don't think. Kelly, you had sent it to us. It was through Goodreads, and you were talking about how in the Wicker King, or in The Way to the Stars, you kind of see how the town has changed since the Wicker King, and how the adults are a little bit more aware of, you know, what the kids need. Because I appreciated that you said that, because throughout the whole of the Wicker King, I'm like, how have no adults in the school noticed that this kid is obviously sick and needs help? This whole time I'm like, oh my gosh.
It took some major things happening for, I guess, the adults to start paying attention.
Yeah, I think, well, the first thing is I'm really in love with like cross-generational relationships and portrayals of places. I think from all of the stuff that happened in Harry Potter, that was probably the only thing that I was like, that is value, that is special, you know, that's very, very unique to this kind of book, where you have these teenagers and then there's this backdrop of things that adults did in the past, that you're not reading like a, you know, back and forth between what the kids are doing in the past, what the kids are doing in the present. It's just, these are the kids in the present and they're living in the devastation of the adults behind them. And I was like, that's sweet. So I was like, okay, I want to keep that and explore that like in some more depth with my own writing and my own stories. And in The Wicker King, I really intended for it to be the beginning of a series of books about this one place and about how, you know, people are relating to each other in regards to the events that happen in this town. So for, you know, The Wicker King, they're the ones who are starting the kind of like chain reaction of changes throughout this place. And by the time like The Way to the Stars happens, all the characters in The Wicker King are old enough to make decisions in their lives, old enough to be the protectors of kids who might need them, and also have clearly gone through therapy. And like the things that they've taught, you know, their son about how to handle certain situations are like very blatantly somebody did, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I think that it's really important to show that communities can change and that people can grow, and that, you know, investing your knowledge in your children is very, very important to having a community of people who are able to, you know, really enrich each other's lives. And I'm probably going to continue kind of like developing that world. I don't know if you guys know about the book that I have coming out after Darling.
No, tell us.
About that? I actually sold Darling in a 2-book deal. The second book is a train heist set in the same town, but it's set in like 2015. And it's about all these kids getting together to rob a train. Because this is the thing that happens in real life. There is a train that goes from, I think, Chicago to New York or something for Christmas, and it's like a luxury whatever, and you know, go for the couple of days, and when you get there, there's like a ball or something. And these kids in this small town, through the path the train goes, are just like, you know what? Let's rob it. And because they need to like, you know, pay for some stuff in their lives, like important stuff like chemotherapy and whatever. And they get on the train to rob it, and it's already being robbed by adults. And then now they're like, let's escape the train. Like, we need to get off. And it just like becomes one of those, you know, like action comedy kind of books. But because it's set in the same town, you get to see like some of the other characters who are like adults at the same time. So like August and Jack and stuff, instead of being, you know, Ahmed's parents in their early 40s, they're like 28. Nice. Just kind of like, we just got out of college. And you know, you see them in the background, and there's this bar that the kids go to when they're planning this heist, and it's owned by the twins. And they're just kind of like, you children look like you need supervision. We recently went through an event that was very devastating. And it's just kind of like this environment where you can see the shadows of the past creeping upon the, you know, events of the future, which is something I really love. But yeah.
Oh, that sounds so great.
Yeah.
So
I'm so glad we'll be.
That will be, I think, summer of 2022, but I'm writing it right now. So
That's really exciting. So
that's great.
It's good to know that there's going to be more books from you. So I love hearing that. More to look forward to. Yeah. So are there any other like authors that sort of inspire you in your writing? Any authors that you read their work and it kind of clicks with you in terms of like, I'd love to sort of emulate that kind of thing, or do you kind of find it more comes from within, or I mean it's probably a combination, I'm sure.
In general, I think the author that I'm most kind of like inspired by in regards to just the craft of storytelling is his name is escaping me. The guy who wrote Holes.
Oh, right.
Oh, Louis Sakar?
Yes. Yes. I recently learned that he's still alive, so I'm very excited to meet him if I can. But yeah, all of his works are masterpieces. In particular, Holes, I'm very focused on kind of like understanding the way that you tell a story that has the kind of impact that makes it feel like you've stepped into a world and then stepped out of a world, specifically for contemporary fiction. I think that a lot of people get their kind of like escapist, fantasies with fantasy and sci-fi. And with like The Wicker King and The Way of the Stars, I really wanted that feeling that people get where they get book hangovers from leaving like a really elaborate world that they were dropped into, but in contemporary. And there are a lot of actually contemporary authors right now who are coming out with some really, really amazing stuff in that regard. But for Holes in particular, I actually have been studying it for about 10 years. The way that the pacing is perfectly split between the 3 separate stories that are occurring within the book, and then the like ending and how he created catharsis for all 3 of those situations was absolutely masterful. And being able to understand your characters and have them like emotionally develop with such a short amount of space like that is something that I like really, really value and I'm trying to learn from currently. And then aside from that, I actually get a lot of my inspiration from film as opposed to other books. I have a style in regards to the pacing of my books that really feels like films. Because I really want the audience to have this feeling that's less about, being the main character and like doing self-insert and more almost like looking into a shadow box at like events that they can't touch or change or really impact, which has the like added component of increasing like stress and like tension. So I'm really inspired by Wes Anderson actually, because I really like the like intricateness of his worlds, but they're also like completely without substance. And I think that that's like a really interesting thing that he's managed to master. And then in regards to like narrative density, I'm really, really, really interested in things like Interstellar, where whatever's going on is just kind of like, oh, that's kind of exciting, but it's an action movie, but the actual like focus of the movie is the like development of like character relationships and also like difficult to name like emotional impact. So like moments like and I'm sorry for being so hyper specific, but at the end of the movie where the lady character goes to like start a new society on Earth, and there's this like really dramatic understanding of the concept of loneliness and of being like an Eve type mother. And those feelings are feelings that are extraordinarily difficult to articulate, but he managed to do it in like a really small period of time. And I'm really, really obsessed with the concept of that because I really love forcing the acknowledgement of subtler emotions. So the like overarching erotic tension throughout The Wicker King, even though there was very, very little actual like sexual activity or content or stuff like that, the relationship between August and his mother and the like horrific situation of neglect, but the very like powerful and palpable love in his home that allowed him to know how to give that kind of familial love to Jack. Things like that are like a little bit more subtle. I think I find in film more often than in books. So I try to like bring that into my work, which makes it feel very unique, or so I've been told.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense based on, having read your books, definitely. I also read in that same interview, I think, that you love fan fiction.
I do.
We also love fan fictions.
Huge fan fiction fans.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite places to go for fan fiction?
I'm actually old school about all of it. I started reading fan fiction when I was 11. Mm-hmm. And I studied fan fiction when I was looking to be 17 and stuff like that. So I prefer Archive of Our Own. And I honor Archive of Our Own because it was designed by people who had been writing fan fiction for a really long time for people who, read and write fan fiction, in response to some of the other platforms and how they're kind of handled. And it's currently like one of the best designed archives that exists globally. So it's absolutely maddening reading about, how important and unique Archive of Our Own is, aside from it just being fan fiction, just the way it's designed and the way it's run is really fascinating. And they really built something that we're going to be able to use for so many other things. Like, how JSTOR is just to use. Maybe one day we can combine some of that technology and make it a little bit easier for people to find things. In regards to like fan fiction itself, I have read a lot of fan fiction on like email mailing lists, like the old Star Trek, email mailing lists. I've read like a lot of the scenes and stuff when I was trying to like, learn about the history of fan fiction. I think I spent a lot of time on fanfiction.net back when that was really popular and important. And then there are a couple of really, really famous fanfiction archives that are specifically for Harry Potter and Doctor Who that have kind of like organized fandom content in a really interesting way. But for me, I have a lot of feelings about fanfiction in general because it's an art form and a way of communicating with media that's predominantly used and created by women and LGBT people. So it's definitely one of those things that's like, this is the way that a marginalized community interacts with a world of fiction that often does not have place for them. So I think that that's something that's definitely worth thinking about, especially when people are mocking fan fiction or talking about it as if it doesn't have value, or making fun of tropes that are designed specifically to cater for us, to us and stuff like that.
Yeah, we've been talking about maybe doing a fan fiction episode.
Definitely worth looking into. It's one of the most interesting kind of phenomenons in regards to building a community of like writers and readers.
Yeah. It's a good point too that you made about the representation for marginalized communities. I think the LGBTQ representation in fan fiction has always been there, right? And it does feel like it was a place for people to write their perspectives and themselves into stories that are more mainstream and maybe they didn't see themselves represented in, and that's super important.
Yeah, it's very interesting, like women, and I'm like across the board, like women, like white women and women of color and women who are LGBTQ, like across the board have like created dynamic like spaces within fandom culture. And I mean, the word fandom, like a lot of people don't respect it, but it's generally just like people who, consume and interact with media. Because most of the like fan fiction as we understand it was created part in part by, the women who were really obsessed with Star Trek. And then also the convention space. We made that too. And the cosplay as like an entire phenomenon was largely spearheaded by women in fanish spaces. And I think a lot of early discussion about the way that women, interact with media and whether women are into comic books, women are into sci-fi, women are into fantasy, like because we weren't doing what a lot of the guys were doing, which was usually like archival stuff, like collecting, action figures, collecting comic books, collecting information. Instead, we were communicating with it, creating our own versions of it, making costumes, talking to each other in groups, sending out mailing lists of all of our little ships and everything like that. It was really disregarded as valueless. And I think there's a lot of like misogyny and racism and homophobia associated with that. So I'm really, liking people talking about, the history and the value of that now, because it's one of the first times that we've ever acknowledged it.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved, and I read Weight of the Stars first and then Wicker King, and when I realized that Jack and August were Ahmed's parents, I got so happy. It really just made me so happy. So in the 2022 book, do we maybe get to see toddler Ahmed?
Maybe. I haven't decided yet. I'm still writing it.
That would be so cute.
Yeah, that would be super cute. I mean, technically, with the timing, Ahmed would be 1 year old when the book would come out. But yeah, and this is like completely immaterial to the plot, so I feel like I can give you the spoiler. I was gonna have August is at the like kind of beginning of his career because he's an author. And I was going to have him have his writing space be the bar that the twins own, and like periodically have people come in and out of that space that were from, the previous books. But yeah, there would be room for that.
I would be.
I put it in, I'll put you in my acknowledgments. I don't take things from people without giving them things. So.
I would probably burst into tears.
Oh.
Because honestly, the acknowledgments for Weight of the Stars, I mean, the author's note too, but the acknowledgments especially just absolutely made me cry. I'm gay, and getting to see these girls just like have this normal, even though it's also kind of extraordinary love story, it matters so much. And I'm really kind of envious of kids today because they get to see so much of this. And I'm 40. I did not get to see a lot of this. This was not in young adult when I was reading young adults. So now I'm reading below grade level, so I can see all this. But the whole like, you all deserve good things, you all deserve happy endings, and it shouldn't feel like a revolutionary statement, but it does. There is no question.
I think no, it's okay. I think that it's actually worth mentioning, because you said that you're in your 40s and you didn't have that. I'm 29 and I didn't have that. This is like something that basically just started happening maybe 10 years ago. So it's really wild to think about, how much of like an arc we're going on in regards to increasing that amount of content. It's sometimes I'll talk to like younger readers, they'll come up to me at conferences and they're telling me, all this stuff. And they're like, what was your favorite like book that you really liked when you were younger? Like, what was your favorite, basically asking what was my favorite like gay book that I liked when I was a kid. And I was like, there weren't any. There was like one and the kid gets killed. Like, it was really like, that was the environment of the books. It was like very Hays Code. You need to know that, being gay is going to make you sad. And if you choose this path, you're going to end in tragedy every single time, even if you were happy for like 5 minutes in the middle of it. And, the look of horror on their little faces, because they know that I'm not that much older than them. And they're just like, oh my God, thank you so much for creating this content. It's like, it's very much one of those things where we're having that kind of like generational trauma where, just having existed in a time where we weren't allowed to be, in comparison to, some of the teenagers now who have a little bit of avenue, is very inherently traumatizing.
Yeah. One of the books we discussed when we first started this was Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld. And there's a line in it that's really negative in the context of that, but it's almost like the subtext is becoming text. And I feel like it's also a good thing because now in in like The Weight of the Stars and a lot of other books, Robin Talley, Nina LaCour, the subtext is becoming text. Like you can actually say and not imply these are two men who love each other. These are two women that love each other. And you don't have to make it kind of Idgie and Ruth from Fried Green Tomatoes where no one says anything. They just happen to like live together for 20 years and raise a kid together. But they're not gay. They're just super close friends.
Yeah.
So I guess also not a question, but thank you for this book because I loved it so much and it felt like actual magic.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you so much for reading it. It's I know, you know, a lot of authors say that, but for The Weight of the Stars, when I was talking about writing a like Women Who Love Women book for teens, my editor was really honest with me and she was like, you do understand that those don't sell as well as books about like gay guys. And I was like, you know, thank you for saying that. And she was like, we won't penalize you if that doesn't sell as well. We won't, you know, stop buying your books or think that it's your fault if it doesn't sell as well as The Wicker King. And you guys came in clutch and bought it. So I'm so happy I can continue to write, you know, this sort of stuff. But I really feel like, you know, having a community that like supports authors that do this is something that we don't talk about a lot, because if you guys didn't show up to conferences, you let us just sit there on empty panels, you know, we'd never have the opportunity to do that again. You know, if you guys didn't buy tickets to events that we went to, they would be like, oh, you don't make any money, we don't want to support you anymore. So in reality, even though we're creating this product and we're creating this content, everyone who reads it and supports it and makes it so that we can continue doing it are, you know, the real heroes of this experience. Because if you didn't, then we'd just fade away.
We're happy to support your books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
not till 2021 for the next one though.
I know.
We have to wait.
But no, seriously, I was texting Julia and Rachel. We had like this insane text thread, and sorry, my best friend from high school is in the studio audience, and she has not read Weight of the Stars yet. So earmuffs. Okay, but like at the very end, I like texted them, and I was like, "Pinky promise." Cry emoji, cry emoji, cry emoji. Yeah. And then I was like, what am I gonna read now? Yeah. And Rachel was like, Wicker King. Yeah. And now I don't know what I'm gonna read now.
Yeah.
Start over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like
I know. I do want to go back and reread Weight of the Stars because I read them in I read Weight of the Stars first as well, and then Wicker King. I'm like, well, now I have to go back and read Weight of the Stars now that I know all of this background from the Wicker King. So, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things we've been asking everybody, so obviously this is the worst possible timeline that we're in right now. How has it affected your reading and writing life, like if at all?
Actually, really dramatically. Before, at the beginning of this year, I was working for a law firm doing stuff with managing stuff for their call center. And since I started, I've like double teamed having a full-time job and doing writing. And when everything just started getting really chaotic with the protests and, you know, Corona and just a bunch of things were happening, I was like at a level of stress that would not sustain being able to do that. And I just sat there and I was like, I need to quit my real job. I need to get out of here. And, you know, I figured out how many, you know, books I would have to do, what, you know, I would have to do to be able to afford to be independent, and left my job. So I, you know, invested in myself from, you know, my advance, and bought some office space and bought myself 5 months of time in which to write the books that will allow me to be able to continue to be a independent author next year. And I feel very like empowered by this decision, because I think for me, in times of incredible chaos, I find freedom in understanding that I can do whatever I want because things are already bad, you know? Like, so I did that, and it's really changed my relationship with my work. I think I've been spending a lot more time thinking about my career trajectory and where I want to be and what kind of work I want to create for people. And then in regards to like actual writing, I've spent a lot of time trying to manage my ADHD because I now have the bandwidth to do so. And it's gotten a lot easier to be able to control when I write and for how long. One of the things that I've talked about for a really long time is not really being able to be one of those people that sits down and writes every single day. And I don't think that will ever happen. And I just don't have discipline like that. And I've accepted it. And, you know, the way that I've structured my day and the way that I structure my writing is incredibly chaotic, but it gets done. And I think that a lot of the time people, especially in like social media writing communities, get really obsessed with the idea of being an author that kind of like has a plan and does things in a certain way, and you know, show off your word count and everything like that. But like I wrote half of The Way to the Stars in 2 weeks. And it was because I procrastinated and it was due. But it's done and it's out there. So like for me, you know, just making sure that I can actually finish something is more important than kind of like creating this environment of like, I guess, peace in doing my craft while things are like messy outside. Messy outside, things are messy in here, you know?
Yeah. I can't believe you wrote half the book in 2 weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was very stressful. I didn't sleep at all. I will never do that again. Like the way for Darling, I also procrastinated, but I gave myself 2 months, which is like more doable. You know, like it's more, you know. But at the same time, like writing a book in like 4 months, like every single time I say that to people, they're like, "Oh my god!" But like, it's not because I'm cool. It's because my brain doesn't work very well. So.
But you found what works for you, right? Like, and that's everyone. Yeah, that's great. And congratulations on being able to quit your day job, and now writing is your real job, right? You said you quit your real job, but I would say you are a writer, so this is what you're meant to do. So it's your real job, and I'm so glad you have more time to do it now.
You're the first person to say that to me. Like that touches me so much. I feel so tender.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. So we always ask our guests, because we like to give book recommendations on our podcast. So do you have a recommendation for us? What should we read?
Actually, let's see. What do I got here? Ooh. So I have just finished A Blade So Black. I have a copy of it. It's incredible. I did a panel with Ella McKinney, and she's hilarious and very cool and owns a lot of swords. So like if you're into like really cool women who are really into Spanish culture, like she's great. If you can get her to do your podcast, like it would be a riot. Okay. But I just started A Dream So Dark, and it's incredible. It's one of those books that as soon as you start reading it, you're in there, you're with them, you hit the ground running right into, you know, the world that you just left. And a lot of people feel like sequels to stuff is like, oh, it's not as good as the first one, but this one definitely like is really, really on that same level, and I'm very excited to finish it. So I'd like to recommend this series if you haven't already read it.
I haven't read it. Kelly, have you read it?
No, not yet. I've heard good things, and one of the things I always say is I have that, but I haven't read that yet. I actually don't have that. But Amanda, my best friend from high school, and we are going to Barnes & Noble after this, and we were going to anyway. But now
didn't you and Amanda go to Barnes & Noble yesterday too?
No one asked you.
Well, this has been so great, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. Where can people find you and follow you?
I am on Twitter at just Kayla Ancrum. I'm also on Facebook, but I don't post there very often. So if you see me, you friend me, I will accept it, but you won't see me saying anything. And then I also have a Tumblr, but it's just kind of like more personal blog, and it is Kaylapocalypse at Tumblr or .tumblr.
Kaylapocalypse, great. Well, thanks again for joining us. This was a delight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that was our show. Thank you so much again to Kay Ancrum for joining us. You can follow us on social media at WYSR_podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com and look us up on Goodreads. We post all the books that we talk about there. So What You Should Read podcast on Goodreads.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.